Hey everyone, welcome back to some Entitled People stories. Here we go. If he can't respect my food, I don't care what happens. So I, female 25, live with my roommate, male 27. I originally lived alone, but due to some financial difficulties, I invited him to live with me. Well, to be specific, one of my friends told me about him when I told everyone I was searching for a roommate. He was fine at first. He didn't smoke and didn't do drugs, so I let him live with me. He pays half the rent and utilities. But we've had some serious issues lately. I work full-time, late into the night, so I cook for myself before leaving for work. It was all good for a few months until recently. Whenever I came home, I noticed that my food was missing. I'd ask him about it, and he would deny it over and over again, every single time. I even started to label everything I made with my name, but my food still kept disappearing, which pissed me off. Now for some additional context, I'm not even a huge fan of nuts. I don't crave them, I don't eat them much at all, but my roommate is severely allergic. He told me when he came to live with me that he cannot consume anything with nuts, so I've avoided nuts in our shared space completely for the sake of his allergy. But after weeks of my food going missing and him always denying it, I just snapped. The thing is, literally no one lives here other than me and him, and he doesn't really have a lot of friends that I do not know since he joined my friend group after moving here. I know for a fact that he doesn't have anyone staying over, so it was him. Plus, I even caught him eating my food a few times. So that just shows that he's a sly pig. It was going to be an especially tiring day, so as usual, I labeled the container with the ribs and left for work. I sent him a message telling him not to eat it with a picture of the container. However, alas, the food was gone. At this point, I was so pissed that I decided that I was going to mess with him. I went out of my way to buy almond powder and put it in my trap meal of mac and cheese. I gave this guy a chance to spare his life. I told him not to eat it. I even made sure to tell him, hey, that mac and cheese is mine. Don't touch it. I even sent a message with a picture of it as usual. I was being extra clear, and just to make sure everything went according to plan, I secretly set up a camera to record the kitchen. This wasn't a random accident. You warned him multiple times, labeled the food, sent pictures, told him directly. He knew it wasn't his. He ate it anyway. The almond powder wasn't in his food, it was in yours. He just decided yours was his. Later that night, I came back and saw that he'd eaten the entire batch. That pig was so effing inconsiderate that he just left the reheated container on the table. I decided to take the camera with me and decided to head out to a bar. If he hadn't eaten the mac and cheese, I would have stayed home and binged Netflix, but he ate it, so I might as well enjoy myself while he struggles with his allergy. So as expected, a few hours later, I found out he was in the hospital with an allergic reaction. His mom used his phone to call me, being furious. She was screaming at me, accusing me of being a monster and poisoning her son by feeding him nuts. I told her that it was food not meant for him and sent her proof. I told her to read the messages I sent him, which showed the container and my reminder that he shouldn't eat it. However, his mom started berating me for being careless, asking why I would have something that he can't eat. I just responded that I told him not to eat the mac and cheese and even labeled it. I got pissed and screamed into the phone that if he can't respect that and he keeps taking my food, then I don't know what else to do. I told her that I've been very clear about this for months and that he keeps on stealing my food and denying it. She then started bullcrapping, asking me if I even cared about him. I told her I didn't, because I've repeatedly told him not to steal my food. I told her that he denied it every time and would still eat it, even if I specifically messaged him not to eat it and labeled the container. I even told her I had video evidence of the whole thing. She didn't want to hear it and started crying, but honestly, I didn't feel guilty at all. I felt like this was the only way he'd learn. I tried conversations, messages, and everything else I could think of, but he just can't cook for himself. How's it my fault? It's not like I put it in his food. It was mine. But everyone's calling me a psycho, but I don't get why I'm the bad guy. I specifically told him not to eat the food. His family clearly raised him to think it was okay to take things that weren't his, and now I'm the one being vilified. Edit. A lot of people are saying that I could get into legal issues or something for putting nuts into the food. The thing is, I made him sign a roommate agreement when we decided to live together, where I specified that food is something we will not share, including cost, and our groceries and food should not be touched by the other person. I added this because he tends to eat a lot of unhealthier foods, such as delivery, while I tend to make my own food to save money. Also, to clarify, I did not consume nuts only because I was considering his allergy. When we started living together, he literally said that I could eat them if I wanted to, but I just didn't because I didn't really need to and I wanted to be considerate. And our second story. Those are the options: sick day or come in. I've always been the kind of person who doesn't get dramatically sick. No dramatic fevers, no collapsing into bed for days, no cinematic coughing fits. When I catch something, it's usually just a scratchy throat, maybe a runny nose, and a vague feeling that I'm not quite at full capacity. If I didn't know better, I could probably power through most illnesses without anyone noticing. The problem is, just because I feel functional doesn't mean I'm not contagious, and I try to be mindful that the people around me might not be as lucky. A few months ago, I woke up with that familiar raw feeling in my throat and a general sense of being off. I knew the signs. I've had strep throat more times than I care to count, and my body gives me that same early warning every time. So instead of brushing it off, I texted my boss first thing in the morning. I told him I was heading to urgent care to get tested and that I'd update him once I knew what I was dealing with. Sure enough, the rapid test came back positive for strep. The doctor prescribed antibiotics and gave me the standard speech about being contagious for at least 24 hours after starting the medication. "You should stay home today," she said firmly. "Even if you feel okay, you can absolutely pass this to someone else." I nodded, picked up the prescription, and walked out, already drafting my next conversation in my head. I called my boss from the pharmacy parking lot. "It's strep," I told him. "They put me on antibiotics. I feel decent, but I'm contagious until I've been on these for at least a day. Since literally all of my job can be done remotely, can I just work from home today?" There was a pause, then his familiar dismissive tone. "No, if you're sick, take a sick day. Otherwise, you need to be here." I tried again, just to be sure he understood. "I'm fine to work, I just shouldn't be around people yet." He cut me off. "Those are the options: sick day or come in." My boss has a special talent for selective hearing. He listens just long enough to form his own conclusion, then tunes out the rest. So I said, "Okay, see you shortly," and hung up. I don't think he caught the tone in my voice. I drove to the office, parked, and put on a mask before heading inside. I wasn't trying to infect the entire building. I was trying to make a point to one specific person. I walked straight into his office without stopping at my desk. As luck would have it, he was in the middle of a video call with a colleague from another department, his door partially open. He looked up as I stepped in. "Oh, hey," he said casually. "They gave you a clean bill of health?" "Nope," I replied, pulling my mask down just enough so he could hear me clearly. "Like I told you on the phone, I've got strep. I feel okay, but I'm contagious." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the prescription bottle, giving it a little shake for emphasis. "Doctor says I need to be on these antibiotics for at least 24 hours before I'm not spreading it." I even coughed slightly, not exaggerated, just enough to remind him of the situation. His expression shifted almost instantly. The color drained from his face as the implication sank in. On his laptop screen, I could see our colleagues trying very hard not to laugh. "Oh," he said slowly, glancing at the pill bottle and then back at me. "Well, why don't you go ahead and work from home today?" I tilted my head slightly. "Really? That's fine?" Yes, he waved a hand, clearly eager to create distance between us. "No need to risk spreading anything around the office." He didn't care about the office until you were standing in his doorway breathing his air. Then suddenly remote work was reasonable. Funny how that works. The colleague on the video call saw the whole thing. You can bet that story made the rounds. "Sounds good," I said, slipping the mask back into place. "I'll log on as soon as I get home." I turned and walked out, feeling my colleague's barely contained amusement from across the hallway. By the time I reached my car, I already had a message from him. Bold move. Respect. I worked the entire day from my living room, answering emails, handling reports, and attending meetings virtually. Productivity didn't suffer one bit. In fact, I probably got more done without the usual office interruptions. Not once did my boss question my availability or output. The next morning, after I'd been on antibiotics long enough to be cleared, I returned to the office. My boss was unusually polite. He didn't mention the previous day's exchange, and I didn't bring it up either. But something subtle had shifted. A week later, when another employee asked to work from home while recovering from a minor but contagious illness, he approved it immediately without argument. I'm not naive enough to think I changed his management philosophy overnight, but sometimes people only understand risk when it stands directly in front of them, holding a prescription bottle and breathing their air. It's funny how policies become flexible the moment the inconvenience feels personal. I don't enjoy proving points that way. I would have preferred he just listened the first time. But if the choice is between infecting half the office or making one stubborn manager briefly uncomfortable, I'll take the uncomfortable manager every time. Funny how remote work suddenly becomes reasonable when the boss realizes he might be the one catching whatever you've got. And our last story. Karen doesn't like the storm drain on her property, seals it with concrete, and floods the entire community. The neighborhood used to be known for two things: the annual 4th of July block party and the blessed absence of anyone who could reasonably be described as a Karen. We had our quirks, sure. Lawns weren't perfectly trimmed every single week, kids rode scooters up and down the sidewalks, and Halloween decorations leaned enthusiastically toward the dramatic. It was the kind of street where people borrowed sugar and returned it with cookies. Then Patricia moved in. Patricia looked like she'd stepped out of a handbook titled How to Be Offended by Everything. Within weeks of unpacking, she was complaining about dogs barking at noon, about kids playing too loudly in broad daylight, and about how tacky our holiday decorations made the neighborhood look. She circulated petitions about acceptable lawn heights and fence colors. She called the city so often that, according to one of the officers who lived nearby, they started recognizing her number and putting her on hold. But her true obsession wasn't children, or dogs, or seasonal inflatables. It was the storm drain. Her house sat at the lowest point on the street. Directly in front of her curb was a wide storm drain grate that had quietly managed runoff for over 40 years. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't meant to be. It was infrastructure, not landscaping. Patricia hated it with the kind of intensity usually reserved for personal enemies. "It ruins the aesthetic of my lawn," she announced at her first HOA meeting. "People can see it. It collects leaves. It's an eyesore. I want it moved." The board explained patiently that storm drains are not decorative features. They are placed according to grading and drainage plans approved by engineers in the city. They cannot simply be relocated because someone dislikes looking at a grate. She tried the city next. Same answer. The drain was necessary and properly positioned. It would not be moved. She threatened legal action against the HOA. That fizzled out quickly. She attempted to gather signatures from neighbors to improve neighborhood aesthetics. Nobody signed. We all knew exactly what that drain did, especially during Florida's enthusiastic rainy season. For 2 years, Patricia waged war on that grate. She planted bushes to hide it, then complained when those bushes blocked runoff and caused puddling on her lawn. She painted the grate beige, which achieved nothing except creating a beige grate. She placed decorative rocks around it, which promptly washed into the drain during the first heavy rain and clogged it temporarily, flooding her own yard. Each failure seemed to fuel her conviction that everyone else was wrong. Then came the concrete. I worked from home, and one Tuesday afternoon I heard the rumble of a truck. I glanced outside and saw a concrete mixer parked in front of Patricia's house. I assumed she was repairing her driveway, which had a small crack she'd complained about endlessly. The next morning I woke to an unfamiliar sound. It was water, but not the comforting kind. It was the kind that suggests something has gone very wrong. I stepped outside and immediately felt my shoes sink into mud. My yard wasn't damp, it was flooded. Water pooled across my lawn, creeping toward the foundation. My flower beds looked like marshland. Down the block, neighbors were emerging from their houses in various states of panic. Lawns on the low side of the street had turned into shallow lakes. Driveways had small rivers running across them. One family, 3 houses down, was stacking sandbags at their basement door. We followed the water's path to its origin, Patricia's curb. The storm drain was gone. Not covered, not hidden, gone. In its place was a smooth slab of fresh concrete, still faintly damp in color. She hadn't poured over it. She'd filled it. The basin and pipe beneath had been packed solid. And it was raining. Not a slight drizzle, but a steady soaking downpour that had started overnight and showed no intention of stopping. Patricia emerged onto her porch, arms crossed, surveyed the chaos like a queen admiring conquered territory. "I fixed my problem," she called out. "That drain was an eyesore. Now it's gone." "You flooded the neighborhood," someone shouted. "That's not my responsibility," she replied. "You all should have better drainage." She filled a storm drain with concrete because she didn't like looking at it. Now the street's flooding and she's standing on her porch saying it's everyone else's problem? The drain did its job for decades. She just decided gravity should take her side. The police arrived first, then the city engineer, then code enforcement, and finally representatives from the county water management district. What had been a neighborhood inconvenience quickly escalated into a municipal emergency. The engineer's face shifted from confusion to disbelief as he inspected the concrete-filled basin. By mid-afternoon, Patricia was in handcuffs. She shouted as they escorted her to the patrol car, "It's my property. I can do what I want." One officer responded calmly, "Ma'am, that drains on a city easement. You just interfered with municipal infrastructure." The charges were not minor: criminal mischief, reckless endangerment, violation of environmental codes. The phrase potential risk to life and property was used more than once. Meanwhile, the rain kept falling. It took the city 3 days of heavy equipment and jackhammers to clear the concrete and restore the drain. During those 3 days, 4 homes experienced water intrusion, 2 had measurable foundation damage, landscaping across half the block was destroyed. My azaleas, which had survived hurricanes, did not survive Patricia. Within a week, a class action lawsuit was filed by the affected homeowners. The city placed a lien on her property for repair costs. The county added environmental fines. Her homeowner's insurance dropped her almost immediately. The financial damage was staggering. Between civil claims and municipal penalties, she was facing over $1 million in liability. She attempted to sell her house, but disclosure requirements meant listing her felony conviction and pending litigation. Buyers vanished as quickly as they appeared. Eventually, the house was auctioned off at a fraction of its previous value. The drain was rebuilt with a new grate, lawns dried out, repairs were made, my azaleas were replanted. We occasionally hear through the grapevine that Patricia relocated to another state. Let's talk about what each of these stories reveals about entitlement. The roommate felt entitled to food that wasn't his, not once, not twice, but repeatedly. He ignored labels, ignored messages, ignored direct confrontations. He even ate a meal he was specifically told not to touch, with photographic evidence. His allergy was his own problem, but he made it everyone else's by refusing to respect boundaries. When the consequence finally arrived, it wasn't malice, it was just the natural result of his own choices. The boss felt entitled to decide what sick meant for someone else. Medical diagnosis? Irrelevant. Doctor's orders? Optional. Contagion risk? Not his problem. He gave 2 options, come in or take a sick day. So the employee came in, right to his doorway, mask down, prescription bottle in hand. Suddenly the options expanded. Funny how risk becomes real when it's standing in front of you. And the third story. Patricia felt entitled to rewrite infrastructure because she didn't like looking at her grate. She spent years fighting the HOA, the city, and basic physics. When none of that worked, she took matters into her own hands, with concrete. She flooded an entire neighborhood, caused foundation damage, and racked up over $1 million in liability. She ended up in handcuffs, insisting it was her property, ignoring that the drain sat on a city easement. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.